for today, which is actually our strategic planning canvas. I'm gonna put that in the chat for you. So let me do that now, and you'll be able to kind of see what I'm doing, and I can edit and stuff like that. But this is our strategic planning canvas here. And Herb, if you could remember, as people come in, they won't see any of our stuff. So if you could, any posts that I put in, if you could, as you admit people, repost some of the stuff, or just remind me to, so that, or if anybody here does, if you see someone, we just need to repost our thing. So there's the link to our it's kind of our focus for today. And we have a few things that we're going to be doing. I'm going to share my screen. I will pop back and forth from sharing it to not sharing it, so that we can have, you can also change your screen view in the upper right-hand corner. You can click on your view and pick a view that allows you to kind of make everybody bigger and the slide smaller, and those kinds of things for those of you that want to do that. So again, welcome to the Global Initiative. For those of you that are new, thank you for coming in. We have a what I call a evolving revolving principle. That is, whenever you show up, it's perfect, and our group will evolve over time. You don't have to be involved at the beginning to be welcome in the middle or at the end. And so we're going to evolve our process, continuously do it, and we'll have a revolving door. Some of you will be involved a little bit more now, maybe a little bit less later, and that's okay. So Herb, if you want to go ahead and hit record, and go ahead and do that.
We're recording.
Okay, great. That's great. So as you all know, if you go to the website for the initiative, you can see all the recordings from our very first meeting that we had last year in the summer. And you can see our notes and all of our documentation on the website. On the link that was in the chat, you can see the website link. You can see our canvas and some other things there. So you have all the resources that we are referring to, you have easy access to here, like in the website link and so forth. And so thank you all for being here. And what I would like to do is just kind of just briefly what's evolved over since last summer with the OD&C division is this idea of bringing a specific focus on the role of doctoral education in our field of OD&C, specifically looking at the doctoral education as a leverage point for advancing the field, and how can doctoral education in OD&C help us to advance the field. And so it was adopted as an initiative by the division. And as you all know, we have a PDW, which is going to be a strategic planning accelerated experience in the summer. It's not going to be the end or the beginning of strategic planning event. It's an event to invite everybody in to kind of get caught up and get their voice in. And we will iteratively be involving people in this process. I fundamentally believe in that system 1, system 2 level thinking, if you all know from thinking fast and slow, or slow and fast, and the notion of intentional collaborative process. And that requires that we continuously allow people to be a part of the process and create ways for us to do that. And so that requires being a little bit more slow, a little bit more intentional. So when we meet in the summer, the PDW should really be a good point showing our progress in the strategic planning and an invitation into continued planning. So I see that as maybe even more of this as being a soft launch, and that being more of a formal launch in August, if you will, of what we're trying to do. Our action steps are right here. And you can see the initiative in the summary and see these steps outlined in detail, but essentially we're building our plan, a strategic plan for the field of, for OD&C, the role of doctoral education in the field of OD&C. So a very specific strategic plan for the doctorate education in the field of OD&C. Our planning process is here. We have a change management team. When you go to the website, what you'll see essentially is people play different roles. Working team, people that have been coming to the meetings, getting into some of the nitty-gritty of the work. People that are advisory, want to come to the meetings and provide advice and maybe not have as much time to get into the details of all the work. You can toggle between those two as freely as you want. That's what I call evolving, revolving. And then the third group is participant. Keep me informed. And sometimes you're in working on something, then you pop out and you're a participant, sometimes advisory group. There'll be a core group that will be the working group. And that's that change management team, if you will, at the very beginning. And that's change management with OD&C as the core ingredient of doing change management. For those of you that know and are familiar with change management, we might have some aversion to the term change management because it seems like it's project management without collaboration to some people. But this is really thinking of how we manage the change process with OD&C. And so it's our OD&C management team. And we have a design team. We had a group that put together the PDW for the summer. And thank you all of you here. You can see the PDW proposal on the website. So thank you all for being a part of that. We had a lot of group. We came together. We worked hard, very fast, and created the PDW. We have the event design. The draft documents that will inform that group is up above, and that's a strategic planning canvas that you're in the slides right now. We're going to be bringing draft documents that will guide us. And we have stakeholder groups. We have the OD&C board, which champions us, and we also have another subgroup that is forming right now. It's all the directors of doctoral programs. We're going to need to meet as a group of doctoral programs and talk specifically about how we want this type of initiative to unfold in service of the doctoral programs that currently exist. And we have had conversations for the last 2 to 3 years. One of our early conversations, I was talking with Peter and Therese at a meeting and said we need to do something with doctoral programs. Tim, Richard, others here, a lot of people here. We Todd and so forth. We had a lot of different people talk about this. Almost everybody here I've talked to at different points. But Therese and I talked a lot about it, and as her liaison with the board has really been helpful in ensuring that we have that support. So we also have facilitation groups and that play different roles. And then we're going to have our event in the summer. And that's not going to be the end all, but that event and this one, and as we build to that event in the summer, will lead to some type of reporting that will come out and some projects so we can start moving on some very concrete things over the course of the next year. The timing will really depend on us, how we roll that out when we kind of put a stake in the ground and say, but I would like to say that after we get out of our August meeting, that we have identified at least 2 or 3 key projects that we can work on over the short term, over the coming year. And that can help us have a sense of progress and movement. Again, all of it focused on doctoral education in OD&C. And so our purpose for today is to move along on a strategic planning canvas. We have looking to see if anybody is here from the history group. Is anybody here from the history group? Okay, right there. Chris, are you representing the group today in terms of talking about your progress on developing the history timeline?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was just going to ask you to clarify what you meant by that.
Gotcha. Because I didn't think so, but I was like, oh, okay. I'm looking here to see. All right. So we want to talk about our history, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but I also want to talk about the planning process and the canvas so you can see what we're filling in on the template. The history timeline is like future searches, layered timeline, looking at what is the history of OD&C doctoral education? What's the history of doctoral education? What's the history of our field? Looking at those layers and what's been happening across those and our world at large, and kind of having a sense of how doctoral education in the field, with doctoral education in general, with the field in general, with the world at large, and kind of looking at those layers in terms of a historical timeline and getting a sense of that. So we want to talk a little bit about that and then look at our next steps. So who is here? Could you all just in the chat just briefly type in who you are, why you are here, and where are you and why are you here today? Just a brief little, just to take a minute to do that, to help us all to get to know each other. Some of us know each other more than others. So it's just a little activity of just saying who you are, where are you, and why are you here today? Let's take a minute to do that. Okay.
So if you turn on the light.
Okay, hold on a second. Somebody's might need to mute themselves. Got some background noise. So you got that? Okay. So great. So in general, we got a lot of people from different walks of life. Does anybody have anything that you're noticing in terms of the chat, in terms of where we're from, what's connecting us? Any observations?
Steve, I think I'm a bit of an outlier here. You know, coming from the communication world, excuse me, the professional communication world, and what I typed in the chat was that I'm here largely because, in my experience, people who study business tend not to study as much communication as I think they should or could, and that's especially the case when we talk about the roles of different types of professional communication. You know, you get a good grounding in marketing, but there isn't anything for public relations, organizational communication, internal et cetera.
Right.
And so that's why I think I'm a little bit of an outlier. I'm not a doc, and I don't do research in the field, even though I am the executive director of the International Public Relations Research Conference. So I appreciate and I'm a consumer of research, but a lot of the consultants I've worked with, whether it's among the big four, when I had my own business, they have an interesting sort of view on communication that is based on the marketing model of simply telling people things instead of really engaging them. And that's why I thought I'd stick my head in here and see if I could be of some assistance.
Great, Sean. Yeah, thank you. That's very welcome. And so, yeah, I want us to get us into conversation. And so you have who's participating and partners, and you have, like I mentioned, all the different groups and who all's been involved with this. We also have our doctoral programs that currently exist. If you look at this list on the slide, before we go into breakout groups and just have a quick chat, I'd like to talk about what programs are out there that currently exist. So as we think, part of getting connected around our history timeline is really understanding what are the programs that currently exist that relate to and or doing things within organization development and change, and what might be missing. And what I'd like you to do, if you could, is I'm gonna put you in a breakout and just briefly talk about what programs are and how do we think about the doctoral programs that are involved in organization development and change. We want to connect those programs. So my question for you is, how do we add to this list? Who needs to be on this list to invite into that conversation? Are we missing anybody? I did into the survey. You all might remember I added to the list from that. So if you could, take a look at that list. I'll put it in the chat if you want. I'll put it in the chat right now. And then I'm just going to ask you to go into a breakout and introduce yourself and just talk briefly about who needs to be involved with us as a part of the doctoral programs that currently exist. If we're going to leverage doctoral programs, we need to have a sense of where are all the programs in the world. I think that's really important. So I'm creating some breakout rooms. You're going to go to the break rooms, just say hi, introduce yourself, look at that list and ask and see if you can add to the list. We're going to take 5 minutes, 7 minutes, and then we'll come back and kind of check on this. So make sure we have our group of invitees from programs and directors that we want to make sure are on this list. Okay.
I apologize. I should be assigned to the breakout room too, but I have made some mistakes, so I have to go back to my breakout room. Can you help me, Steve? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Should, let me 1 second. Okay, you're here. I'm trying to think of how.
You can assign me any breakout room.
You're in a you're in a room right now. You're already in a room.
You
You
see?
just don't. You're not seeing it on your
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how to remake it posted. It might be if you click on breakout rooms, click around the bottom, see if there's
I
any.
see. Okay, I joined the breakout room. Thank you.
Okay, bye. Great. Awesome. So you want to pause the recording? Or yeah. So I tell you what, yeah, no, this is fine. I'm going to go to the slides in here. So welcome back. So I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to ask you a question, like just a little summary of what you talked about in your group, what came up in your conversation. Second, I'm going to put a link in for you all to edit slide number 8 to add what needs to be missing. We can crowdsource this. So let me put the link in, and then you can go to that. So in the chat, you can see the link. So here, but tell me, what did you all talk about? What were some things that came up in your conversation? Could I get a few summaries?
I can start.
Yeah.
So we had a very international group other than me, and it was very interesting. We had Gert Jan, who is from the Netherlands, and he said his is really the only program in the Netherlands, but it's not a PhD program. And he said that there's the view that OD is not science-based. We also had Guy, who said that what did he say? That oh, I can't remember offhand, but Maria, we spoke to Maria, who said that the term organization development as a PhD program doesn't necessarily capture everything. So she's teaching in Anderson, South Carolina. And so the program that she's affiliated with is called Leadership and Organizational Studies, but it's basically a PhD program. And Guy, forgive me if you could summarize some of the points you were making as we were closing out. I would appreciate it.
No, I was just introducing myself because I came late. Remember, this is why you cannot remember what I said. I didn't say anything.
Oh,
I just
okay.
introduced myself. Sorry.
Yeah. So anybody want to add anything else? There's a couple interesting points that have come out. One is,
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to add something before you summarize them. Our little group came up with a number of programs that we'd like to add to the list. So that's going on. And I said that my special interest is in letting people know about it, how OD is a different kind of science. So that comment that OD isn't science-based, which we have heard for generations, I'd like us to respond very strongly to that in terms of being able to show methods that in some ways are more successfully scientific than the mainstream, and then empirical positivism. So I'm hoping something about that gets into the OD program, the doctoral research methods part of the program.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And what I would offer too is that is part of what I think will be one of our initiative projects that'll come out of this initiative is how do we, frame up the science? How do we frame up the field? How do we influence that? How do we influence within the academy? Those kinds of things. We got to pick our priorities and pick carefully. We can't do everything, but one of them that I could see something like that bubbling up. I mean, I think I told you that, when you look in the United States jobs listings, the official jobs listings, do you all know this, where OD is listed as a job? It's listed under training and development, which is listed under IO psychology. We're 3 down under IO psych. The OD is listed as a job under training and development that reports to training and development, which reports to IO psych, so to speak. I think that's not right personally, but we got to change that. So And then there's a lot of different layers and faces. So great. So what do you all think about, so as you look at the list here that I have, is everybody getting additions on there? You can click on the link in the chat. And please put them in there. And if and any information you can have, I have done a lot of global searching. It's hard to find sometimes the program itself. Like you put in AAHUR in Denmark. I don't know what college, what department, where to go. And a lot of times I won't even know what to type in. So I need a little bit more information. Our friend Herb, where's Herb? Wave, say hi, Herb. Herb's GA in our doctoral program. He is helping with our program, a variety of stuff. And so he'll be working on helping track down these things, and I'll have another person doing that. It'll make it easy for them to find something. Because I can tell you, I'll go to some of these places, I'll have a hard time. So anything you can give, like GW Ashburn, is there a name of the program? Do you have the name, the actual name of the program that you can put in?
I know it. It's human and organizational learning, Steve.
If you can, and even putting in a link, like highlighting, or just put a link in right next to the name, or type in the title and we can Google it. Just anything you can put in there to help.
And Steve, while I have the floor here, I was also wondering if you wanted to include umbrella associations or networks. Like I think the one that's very popular in Europe is called IODA. IODA.
Yep. I'm familiar with IODA.
Yeah.
So here's
and
what
then
I would
of course
do.
OD&C, etc.
Well, that's a good thing. So let me do this here. I'm going to do something while I'm right here. I don't know if my screen is sharing anymore. I don't think it's sharing. But if you're in that slide, I'm doing something a little different here. And I will do something here. I'll make this a little wider, because I think that list is a little bit smaller. So associations and orgs to include. And so what I have, OD network. Oh, and of course, we've got the OD&C division for AOM. There is ISODC. There is IODA. I've been to all these conferences. Then there are others, right? There's ACMP. There is ATD. Now, the question is, do we kind of draw a line and say indirect, like those that are like specifically focused on the field officially, like that. So if you all have any to add, please add. Organizations, it could be for-profit, not-for-profit. Those kinds of things. If you have anything to add, please add that over there. You can see that on the right. And again, I'll put the link in. And what's nice about crowdsourcing is we can all edit synchronously here in this document. So let me put it in the chat.
And Steve, in our group, it was Ken and Richard, and Ken is interested in finding out more about such a program in Japan. And Richard mentioned that he had talked to you. One other potential future opportunity might be universities like mine, University of Denver, where we have a PhD in business. There is no focus in particular on ODC, but could there be? What would it take to get some of these universities to have specializations or some kind of
right on. And Joe Marie, what's really cool is that's what can come out of this strategic planning process is we pick a project to advocate for programs and make the case. So for example, in our business school, we started our doctorate, and Therese was a big partner and supporter of us creating it. And so it's Todd. I wish Todd was here from Cabrini. But a lot of you here were very helpful to us. And Trish, you'll be happy to know, like, we are the most inquired about program of any master's or doctoral program at the university for the 3 years, 4 years going now. It's crazy, right? I mean, it's like when they say, like, the university publishes what programs are inquired about. Our program is number one of master's doctorates in healthcare, MBA, online MBA, social work, you name it, even data sciences and data analytics, which was a new program out. So there's a lot of interest. The other thing is how do we frame it, Joe Marie? Like, we call it a D period ODC versus like a DBA. And what we're finding is that it really helps to have that name in the title because it provides a unique feature, a professional brand for those that are interested in the field. So my son is calling me, and they're off on spring break, and he's 9, and he's with his grandma. So let me answer real quick. Hold on one second.
We don't all have Steve's problem with so many people with good marketing.
Yeah, the irony is that for going on 7 years as part of my practice, I ran the higher education and secondary education agency practice at my marketing agency. And one of the hardest things in the world was finding the people who make decisions and getting them to listen when I would talk about the ability of helping them more effectively market their programs. It was one of the hardest things I ever did. 7 years of my life I'll never get back.
Yeah. So, but I think there's a wonderful opportunity, Therese, for us.
Steve,
and
just tell us he's okay. Just give us the skinny. Is he okay?
Oh, I'm sorry. He is. He wanted more time on his Nintendo Switch.
Okay, thanks.
Because I have them timed. Thanks, Therese. Yeah, so everybody's good. We're on a farm. So let me tell you, we've had accidents before, and it's a little scary. So, yes. So thank you. Yeah. So thank you all. This is wonderful. Keep adding to this. If we can all crowdsource here, that's really important. The next phase is going to be to invite. I think it looks to me like maybe we have some type of a stakeholder group around association and organizations meeting, like with those groups and people that run those organizations to talk about the field. And then if all the program directors or representatives from all these programs, these doctoral programs, having a meeting with a representative to talk about specifically linking into and ensuring the programs have a voice within the context of all that we're doing as a whole. So this is really, really pretty super what you all are putting in here. And please put anything you can in that would be like CASE. I have friends over at CASE. There's a few programs, and I think Ram was talking about a couple things there. If you could add in, which of the programs at CASE do you think would fit? And we can always ask them, but if there's a person or anything to give us a clue of where to go, like I know the people at CASE, so I can reach out there. But others, like at Columbia, I know people there. I don't know anybody at Tilburg. I don't, and then at Denmark. I know David. So I can go through a lot of these, but some people I may not know. So if you could help, that would be great.
Steve, just to add another name, I don't know if it's still active or not, but UPenn had an org dynamics program, a PhD.
Yeah, and Bill Rothwell and Jackie asked me to join them on Practicing OD, so I'm now co-editing Practicing OD with them.
Yeah,
and so I've been talking with Bill about that. And Bill, as you know, I don't know how he does it. He's probably got his fingers in more things than anybody on the planet does, and so yeah, make sure that's on here. I don't know if I have Penn on there.
You don't have UPenn here, no.
Yeah, could somebody add that UPenn, and I just got to make sure I talk to Bill about that specifically. They have a master's. I just don't know what doctorate program they have, and I got to ask him about that.
Yeah, they had
so
anyways.
Yeah. So if I could pause, Richard, if I could ask you from your perspective and Therese from your perspective on the board and AOM. I think one of the unique lever points for this initiative is, and I've been to every OD field futuring event since like early 1990s. So my goal is for us to sort of shift how we're going about thinking about the field and influencing the field. I'm hoping that we can do it through doctoral education. And I think the academy as a core home base for that is important. Could you speak a little bit about what you're seeing, what we're doing, any advice? And then after you're done with that in this conversation, which this is, as I get into slide 10, which is the why now, why do we need to do this now? Why do strategic planning for doctorate education, not for the field, but for doctorate education as a collective? Why now? And what are your thoughts around AOM and anything else you would like to share from the division?
Patrice, did you want to go first or do you want me?
Please go. It's so nice to hear your voice, Richard. Wake up.
Please do.
Oh, we got Therese and we got Patrice. From the board's perspective, the challenge that we're finding is OD papers will come to the division, but change papers could be submitted to any of the divisions. And so as I've been listening to this conversation unfold and, being with Joe, Marie, and Ken, there's something about doctoral education in organization development and change, but there's two buckets. There are those schools that you were listing and trying to list, and then there are those schools where people can go and get a doctorate, a PhD, an EDD, and all that, not necessarily in such a named school, but, in a management school or a business school and all that. And Steve and I, we've had conversations about this. Ultimately, we want to produce good students, good scholars that will go out and conduct impactful research and all that. But how do we bring them all into a bigger tent is what I would, sort of say. How do we identify them? And so I'm going to come back to my first point. The OD&C division wants the change papers and the OD papers to be submitted to the division, and it's not happening. And that is something that we are working on so that we are the division where such papers come to. Patrice, save me from myself here.
You never need salvation any more than any of us do. So I tend to agree with Richard, and yet I'm kind of looking at all of these Post-it notes on my wall, and many of them are what I would call classic OD papers, and many of them aren't. So I think there's a kind of floating issue of, what are the boundaries and what do we want them to be? And that's true for the division, and it's also clearly true for this excellent initiative. I do absolutely agree with Richard that many of the places in the world that are producing OD scholars, maybe less OD scholar practitioners, but OD scholars, don't have OD&C in the name of the doctoral degree. I came out of one of those, and I've taught in a couple of them. And so I think it is a real kind of strategic decision for this group about whether or not, just to pluck a couple, whether or not we would want to try to convince an OD group within a place like King's College in London, or whatever is going on at the LSE at the moment, to be part of this initiative. I would say yes, if the purpose of this initiative is to, amongst other things, is to see, how to continue to improve the quality of doctoral education for people doing this kind of work in the world. If the point of this initiative is more on the scholar practitioner side, which I kind of tend to think that maybe it should be, then it might be less important, because those programs that I'm talking about tend to be producing people who want to go into academic jobs. And so, kind of maybe a check-in from this group about, like, what are we for? What is the kind of good that we're wanting to support in the world? The last thing I'll say is more specifically related to the division. I, for one, think that the OD&C division in AOM, there's beautiful low-hanging fruit for us to grow our division and further strengthen it. And that is to be a better home, even than we are at the moment, for OD&C students. And so for me, when I traverse out of this program chair role into the role that Richard's in now, and then in a couple of years, the chair of the division, I really want strengthening our place as a home for OD&C students, where they can get good value from membership of the division and participation in the division. That, for me, is a kind of personal goal. So that's one of the reasons why I'm. So there are all sorts of reasons, I think, why the board was so keen to support Steve and others in launching this. There's a lot there, Steve. I guess you could pick up on in any one of those mini points.
Yeah, just anybody have thoughts, reactions to what you've heard?
Well, one of the things that came out in our group that we didn't add any schools to the list, but one of the things that jumped out was sometimes it's in Department of Education, sometimes Department of Business. I think we saw one in psychology, and that probably comes from the the nature of what we're doing. And I'm in the strategy division too. And I review for the Journal of Knowledge Management. And I get papers I'm thinking all the time, that really belongs in the OD&C division. And I think that's, one of the problems that we have is that we're so diverse that, you in so many different divisions, so many different applications create a confusion. I said, I just reviewed one a couple of weeks ago in the Journal of Knowledge Management, and it was all about, how do I manage knowledge when you're going through change? Well, that belongs in the OD&C division. So I think so. I don't know how we clear that up, but I think it's one of the challenge, multidisciplinary. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to, Patrice, I appreciate your comments. I'm Kent Rhodes with Pepperdine's PhD program in Global Leadership and Change, and also our MSOD program, which both are scholarly practitioners. We have a thesis that is required for the master's program, and of course, a dissertation for the PhD. But I agree with you. So I'd be curious, in this group, our students are working executives. They are not students going into academia. In fact, that's rare. And so, for example, I'm chairing a dissertation right now from an executive from J&J, and she's going to bring change to the world. And so it's so I do think that, at least for us, that's a really clear pathway. And that was a very specific choice that we made to do both the PhD dissertations to provide great input into the field and people out working in the field.
Yeah, Ken, I'll give you a thought on that real quick. And then I do think that this is a wonderful part of what we're trying to do in the strategic planning. We've got to keep this conversation going, catalog these thoughts, theme these thoughts, and get them to crystallize towards some type of convergence for us to move forward. But what I'll tell you, like with our program, what I'm seeing and what we're moving in the direction of is a doctorate in OD&C and then a PhD in OD&C. And what we're looking at doing is preparing working adults in their 40s and 50s who are in a second generation that want to go into academia and research tier 1 institutions to do research. And in OD&C, as well as those that get the doctorate in OD&C that may want to be lecturers, maybe a teaching university. And we have already 3 people moving into potentially tenure track positions at teaching universities in OD&C and we're only in our 5th year. right now. And one is at, I think it's Oberlin, O'Brien. It's the social entrepreneurship, and he's an assistant professor. He's 60 years old. He's had a long career in consulting and so forth. He is excited, and he's an assistant professor at their university. And then I have others that say, I want to do all research. I want to go into like serious research. And I've got 20 years on my career left, and I want to dive in and start learning and getting into it. Can you imagine having someone as a tier 1 institution doing research and in the classroom with the students, right? So there's a whole new generation of professionals that want to be research track or teaching track, or like a combination where they're doing consulting and teaching, and the scholar practitioner track or the academic track. I think that's fantastic, right? Opportunity for us. And we got to like do we got to do the strategic analysis to kind of have that bubble up. Chris, looks like you were going to say something. You're on mute, Chris.
I think that's such a great point, but I kind of want to flip this over from the student side. And, you know, this the same that we had difficulty identifying OD&C programs and sort of got stymied. When you're a PhD student interested in it, you're thinking about, I need to be placed at the end of this road. And if there aren't OD&C programs in abundance out there for me to go into, I'm going to go to another division maybe to submit my papers to get into that network, so I can make sure that I get a job in strategy or leadership or something like that. And I'm wondering about whether there's a way to define what those pathways might be for programs at tier 1 institutions that don't have OD&C programs, and how the students in OD&C can position themselves to fit in some of those places. And I'm sure, you know, this is something that's discussed all the time with doctoral students in the program, but I think we need to look at it from the demand side too. Like, what do schools want? And how can the grad students in OD&C position themselves there? And so your experience with that student got placed in a Research 1 institution is a great example. Like,
yeah, they didn't get placed in a Research 1. It was a teaching university.
Okay, but how did they do that? And you know, if you want to go to an R1, how do you do that from an OD&C member?
Yeah, so I think these are all great. Anybody have anything else? We're going to transition to the next conversation, but anybody have anything else before we transition?
It's Therese, can I add a quick one-liner? Yes. And it's that we know historically the OD&C division has been one of the strongest divisions of the academy. Having said that, there's a little bit of intimidation factor there, and we'll see students who would tend to present, who may be getting OD degrees, who default to the MC division or default to HR, or, you know, smaller GDO, one of those. So once you start knowing the acronyms, in that the OD&C division was so big, there was a little level of, I don't know anybody there, or let me just add that to it. And maybe that's just my perception.
Yeah. And Richard's raising his hand.
Yeah, this is not a conversation coming from, you know, the EC and all that, but I was listening to everybody. I think we have to be aware that the landscape of higher education is changing. I do not know where it's going to be in 5 years. And there may be an opportunity for what we're talking about today to leverage that. There may be, you know, I don't know but there could be a bifurcation really between those few Research 1 schools and, you know, everybody else. And, you know, the opportunities may actually increase for the, you know, people like me, you know, classically trained and all that, And what you're doing at Bowling Green, Steve, may actually be, there may be more opportunities for students coming out of these programs to teach that I'm not sure were there before, especially in schools of business with ACSB accreditation and all that. There's just a lot of things in play right now, and we don't know how it's going to end up. So I think we have to be aware and watch those for real opportunities to pivot.
Right on. Other thoughts? Anybody have anything else they want to add?
So a little broken recording for me, and that is that, so you got a couple of different communication issues here. One is articulating the central value proposition of what it is that you're attempting to do, and then applying that to discrete stakeholders and audiences. So to Richard's point, I mean, I've seen the trend now for the past 11 years that the changes in higher ed are moving, in some institutions are moving toward, more and better research, but most other institutions are focusing on the students and really on undergraduate. And so this trend over time will lead, I think, a lot of advanced degrees to be revisited in the context of that need. So you wind up, you continue to see a reduction in tenured and tenure track faculty in favor of teaching faculty. And I think those trends are likely to continue, especially over the next 5 years. But there is the elephant in the living room is the value overall of a college education that is being called into question in our current sort of anti-intellectual movement. So that would be in this, if you know the Minto method from Great Britain, the situation is fraught and the complications are many. And so the central questions about that we have to answer, need to be pretty thoroughly inventoried from a comm perspective. The more that we can anticipate what it is that, not so much objections, but what the situation is going to demand of us, then the better we can do in our messaging platforms and our methods of delivery to make sure that we're calling those things out.
And I think that how we make our value, how we communicate the value, and how we call people in and make ourselves sticky and actually elevate ourselves to another level as a field, I think is the question. And it's not for us as a field as much as what is the role of doctoral education in that, so we can stay really in that kind of narrow lane a bit, is how I think about it. What role can we play? Let me show you some stuff here that I want to see here. Yeah, there we go. Trying to get one thing here. Pull this up and share my screen. Look at it. All right. So, lots of ways to do planning. You all have done it. Some of you, many do it a lot. And this is sort of my approach, if you will. And I'm always welcome to informing it and helping it to be better. But essentially, I think the question is, really kind of follows along, if you all are familiar with the change formula, the DVFS that I'd like to refer to, that Kathy Dannemiller popularized, that came out of MIT with Ardress and some others way back when, Beckert and so forth, wrote about it. But essentially, why now? And then we got to look at our history, kind of pulling from Future Search and some of Weisborg's work and Lippett's work, and moving into a strategic analysis. I like the technical nature of strategic analysis. If you all can go through, you can see the tools that that I think just are a good set of tools. On the slides, you'll see a variety. And it's really more along, it's really it's paying it, it's looking at what is and trying to get some agreement on what is. And then a strategic summary, we can always do a SWOT, where we can pull from Jackie Stavros, who has done SOAR, which is an appreciative inquiry approach to looking at summarizing, the current state. And then getting into a strategic plan, and you can see the document on the cover slide. You'll see, I'll put the link down below as well. And then out of that flows projects that align with the plan, and we get moving forward. And there's short, medium, and long-term projects. And we have a reporting and implementation continuous improvement. So that's kind of how I think of it. And the strategic planning document is informed by 1 through 4. And then there's a strategic plan document itself that really focuses on, kind of a statement of where we are, where we're going with projects and coming out of that. So that's the general flow of how I approach it. I really welcome people adding to that. When we come into the why now, we've been talking about that now, and we've got the historical review. And one of the things, we have a group that's working on that. I don't think they're ready to share today, but they will on the next meeting. A look at using that timeline. Are you all familiar with the timeline exercise and future search that Marv Weisberg and so forth, which is, you think of layers, and think of layer 1 being doctoral education, and looking at over time, what are key events in doctoral education in OD&C, like over the last 50 years. And then you kind of look at it for doctoral education in general. Then you look at higher education, and then you look at OD&C as a field, and then you look at the world at large, and you try to get a sense of kind of where is all the history and kind of what are the key events. And so we're mapping out that to try to have a sense of where things are. And the group has been working on that since the last time. Now, while we get a kind of an agreement on our story and our history, we can then move into some different tools. And some of these you'll be familiar with. I love Porter. And the 5 forces. And now you're going to look at the language on here, but think of the language in terms of changing the name firm or company or whatever. Change the name to the doctoral education, OD&C doctoral education, as a collective. And think about how, entrance, how easy is it for new doctoral programs to set up in OD&C, or in how many other programs are out there? What are the substitutes for OD&C or related programs? And so, like, we talk about directly OD&C and those that are in the field related programs. How much power do the suppliers have? And who are the buyers, and so forth. But really thinking about that. And then, you move into value chain analysis and look at our doctoral education as a collective. What is our infrastructure? How are we managing the human resources? Like, for example, getting faculty to teach in the programs and helping nurture faculty teaching. And what about technology? And what about, procurement, inbound logistics, think about all of that from the perspective as a field, kind of just step back and look at it. Then you can take the pestle environmental analysis, and you can look at what's going on out there in the environment that directly relates to doctoral education. I can see implications there for that related to the research that's being done, where our students are coming from, to even looking at how the profession itself is being framed and positioned by government and society as a whole. How is it being positioned in organizations? Like, what are we noticing? These are the kinds of things for us to look at, all the way down to looking at this VRIO and kind of thinking about doctoral education. Is it valuable? Is it rare? Is it inimitable? Is it organized? And as we think about how we're setting it up, what are we doing to make it, provide, if people have got choices, and if people are thinking about what they're doing, we can reframe this, but the bottom line is, how do we reframe these tools to help us think about our strategic planning for us as a loosely coupled, as it's called, or loosely connected body of programs? So I do think these are tools for us to look at, to pause. This is not about what we should be doing. We're not looking at the future yet. We're just really trying to get agreement on kind of what are the critical issues. Some of this stuff may apply, some of it may not. Some of these variables, some of these buckets that we can design into. But as you go through all that, the end result would be coming down to this here. As a collective of doctoral programs and doctoral education and faculty and students and so forth, what are our strengths? What are our aspirations? What are the results? And what are some opportunities for us out there? And I do think that can then inform us creating a strategic plan. And if you go up to the top, I'll put the actual framework here for you. Let me get it here. Is that the cover slide? I'm putting it from the cover slide down here. A simple framework for us to then we work into creating basically what's our mission, what's our vision, what are the goals that we want to aspire to with doctoral education, and what are our values inherent in doctoral education. Out of that comes specific projects or objectives. What do we want to start targeting? So this is the general framework. And for the PDW in August, we're going to bring a summary of this work between now and then into that experience and engage the people there in an accelerated conversation around each of those things. If you go up and look at steps 1 through 7, the PDW will touch on these 7. And we won't be able to do all, you all know, we can't do that in one PDW. We can't do it all thoroughly, but we can touch on these things and move to a brand. The goal would be to get input on a draft document, a 2-pager strategic plan, and to get a brainstorm of potential projects, things to work on that are specific and tangible that we want to leave with, and have some sense of voting. Those of you that use collaborative change techniques, there's a way of doing dots and checks and so forth, and brainstorming and putting some stuff up in the whole room, kind of identifying key priorities for the coming year, either short, medium, or long-term focus. So let me pause. What are your thoughts on this? And knowing just general reactions or questions around this. Let me just pause.
I think it's a good process, Steve. I like the way you laid out stuff systematically.
Is this the right thing to be doing? Do we need to follow this? Do we need to change this? Do you all, I ask this every time because we have different people come in, but I do always want to pause and say, is this the right flow? Do you think of it as a logical flow?
It certainly is, quite comprehensive. When it comes to the comm side of things, I developed a process that I've used for a long time with clients that is more brief, and for the communication portion of it, it could apply to any of these levels. I call it AMO, Audience Message Method Objective, and you do a 2x2 box articulating objectives for each audience member, and then the message platform, and finally how it is you're going to deliver or otherwise engage people around those messages. And there are a couple of places in here, obviously number 5, the strategic plan itself, and then the strategic projects, all of which could use their own sort of AMO model for it. Is the intended output from this? Describe, if you don't mind, describe what the intended output is. What does this look like when it's completed?
So a couple things, Sean. One, on the website, you'll see a link to our the proposal for the initiative, and it does outline that. I'll give you a quick answer now, but it goes into some detail on that in terms of what we're trying to do and the steps and the process and so forth. But the output is an agreement on a strategic summary of what's kind of the current state of the field. We got to have We got to have some documentation to say, hey, here's our history. This is our story. So documents for each of these. The strategic plan simply would say, what is the mission of doctoral education? What's the vision and so forth? A document that would outline that with a very clear document leading to, from the strategic plan, to a document that says, these are our projects and priorities that we want to do to advance the field of doctoral education. A very clear statement. I like these kinds of things to be executive summary form, like 2 pages each, maybe a page, in some cases, but you basically get like high level. The strategic analysis, we got to ask all those questions one way or another. We got to just ask them. We can take some out, but I do think that we got to sort of at least address them and then figure out of all of that, what's most important and boil it down to a summary. And so the output is going to be documents that will be for each of these with a clear set of projects document that we will then begin to work through the academy and through the partner organizations and the program directors to try to figure out how do we start moving in the implementation phase, actually have some kind of tracking of our progress on some key things. One of them, Sean, hopefully you'll have the energy to stay a part of this, around strategic communication. I could see a very clear and project coming out that I would call GOT OD, like got milk. Like, what is the GOT doctorate in OD&C plus, if you will, related programs, right?
That's helpful. Thank you, Steve. And I dropped a PDF of an article I wrote a few years ago for the Public Relations Society publication that kind of just explains in simple terms what the AMO is all about. It's not as sophisticated as any of the methodologies that you've shared, but it's worked really well for me.
Okay. All right, cool. So what I'm thinking, I'd like to ask you all, this is a process check now. I think we can move towards wrapping up. I think this is about moving us forward to between now and next month. I would like to create a survey, if you will, for lack of a better word, but an input form where all these types of questions concise down, but really getting to the questions that are related to history and so forth, and send it out to you all and to the whole group. We have 150 people that have signed up, and asking people, hey, this is going to take about an hour to fill out. This is not about, hey, a quick 7-minute survey. We really gotta, I want to argue and offer that we need to move out of system 1 level thinking, and we got to get into system 2 level thinking. We got to get thoughtful about this. So we can't just make it fast. Okay, I need. So my ask of you all: how many of you would be willing to take an hour? And if I go through questions in each of the 7, it's each of the. We're not going to worry about 6 and 7. It's actually up through number 4. It's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Getting input on 1, 2, 3, and 4, and asking questions, and you listen, you think, you provide data, put your information in, we take it, bring it back, I compile it into a document that I bring to the next meeting. Does that sound like the right next step?
I think that's helpful. Are we gathering our own thoughts or thoughts from the institution, or?
I'll be sending it out to everybody that's on the list individually, asking individuals. In the meantime, I'm going to be tracking down the directors of the different programs and getting them engaged in the process, as well as the organizations that are listed, and try to get representatives from there. And so we'll be keeping track of the 3 groups, if you will: our whole community, 2nd, doctoral programs, 3rd, organizations and associations.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and there was a mention before, just a couple of points that came to mind about implementation is in managing implementation across different schools and areas. I think the ecological systems view, macro, micro level is helpful across the timelines, and thinking about what some historical barriers to entry have been as a recently graduated student or students who are entering in the program. And then there was a bit of a chat about professional and academic tracks and what will be helpful for students in terms of the context professionally, that might be quantitative or qualitative, because historically, maybe if there's social science or behavioral science connections to what specializations are for OD&C, or more of a generalist approach or a balance to that, might be most beneficial to students, and what that looks like in terms of metrics for success. Just wanted to comment on those few things that came to mind when hearing all the insights today.
Steve?
Yeah.
So I was thinking that one of the values of this group is to really map out what's happening currently in the US and beyond the US. Some of the concerns people raised today about the state of OD&C education, I think, are worth capturing. And the title of the group seems to limit what we're looking at to just PhD programs. And as we've heard today, schools have different monikers for their programs. They're not always PhDs. Sometimes the education is on the master's degree or certificate level. So I don't know if that's adding too much, but to really capture what's happening and the depth and breadth of this type of education, it seems like we need to go a little beyond PhDs.
Yeah, it's interesting, Joan. I've thought about that. That's tempting for me, tempting as well. One of the challenges has been that there's other groups that are like master's level groups that are like working and trying to connect around their master's programs. What hasn't been, and those groups don't tend to relate to the doctoral programs as well, and there tends to not have a voice in the process. So I'm looking at keeping it to doctoral, not PhD program, but any doctoral program. And I think what we're doing is broadening it to any doctoral program within any college that it can have OD&C in the name or not. And that's the intention. And I think with the academy, keeping it at the academy, we could move to master's programs. But I do think that there's a unique experience in the doctoral education because of the dissertation research that makes it different than master's. But I'm open to us figuring out, maybe me personally, from what I've heard, I would think we'd want to think about that next, or how to relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment, because our program has a pathway master's on the way to the doctorate as well as a milestone. And I know there's some certification programs that are led into as a pipeline, or that's one of the goals, especially in terms of the enrollment concern for the landscape of higher ed.
Gotcha. Yeah.
The other thing is, in the chat, Martine Bizouard, she was asking whether programs that whether those doctorates are just focused on OD&C, or if you wanted to add doctorates like DBAs that may have courses in OD&C as part of, the programs.
So it's open. From what I've learned over the last year is that there is a point at which it's not, I don't know, there's a line. Like, when does it become a program that emphasizes OD or teaches a class in it? And then is there, and so I think the general consensus has been, as long as the program has an emphasis on OD&C, social behavioral sciences, as an emphasis of its program, that would be kind of what we're shooting for, as kind of where the boundary maybe would be in terms of inviting.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So you all think that if I send out the survey looking at 1 through, basically it's really getting at getting at the strategic analysis, historical review and strategic analysis. It might be even the strategic summary. We could ask some questions around that, like the SOAR, and keep it at those. Get it out to you all, everybody. Say, please take an hour. Give some thought to this. Answer these questions. Send it back. We have to compile it and bring something back to the next meeting as a summary, so we can create some type of a consensus around this. What do you all think? Is that the right thing to do? I need some help knowing if that's right.
It's Trace, Steve. Am I clear that what we're working on and what you're suggesting we do, if you were to preface your next message to the group and say, in an effort to design or prepare for Academy, and you give it that urgency, because I like everything that's happening. I don't think people see a timeline, and I don't think people see not the urgency, but the importance of responding with deadlines, because I think what you're doing well is preparing us for Academy. Yet I don't know if people understand their response will help contribute to Academy. So I'd
Make sure
probably
that's clear in the message. Yeah.
please, yeah.
Yep. I'll do that. Okay. That's a good
And
point.
I assume that if there could be 5 from Benedictine, you would take all 5.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's everybody that's a part of this. We'll send it out to we have 150 people on our list that signed up to give input on this.
Yeah, and I was just listening to that, you know, the difference between masters, but I'll add to it that we even have in the Chicago area undergraduate org development. Go make sense out of what a 21-year-old is going to learn or can get their head around. But we know that Roosevelt, you know, Deb Orr, who's a good OD person, is teaching undergraduate OD. I don't get it, but it works for them.
We have a couple of undergraduate OD programs. I would say that what's interesting, because we had a full-time master's as well that we had put on pause, and we now are executive masters. It's pretty impactful where those students are today. That I was in the program. I mean, it's really interesting to see the impact of it on them, because they were 20. These were 22-year-olds, you know, and you know, that were wrestling with it. So, well, everybody, thank you. So the next step, and I haven't heard from everybody. Anton, you've been paying attention, and Rachel, and let's see here, Ken. I'm curious if there's any just parting comments from those that have been listening. Maria, if you have some thoughts. I just want to make sure we have everybody as we part, a closing voice in terms of, is this the right direction, and any advice as we go forward. And Therese, thanks for
I'll add one more thing. Put a timeline on it. Was your call from 10 to 12 or 10 to 11? I mean, so we ask people to not put things, you know, give us more than an hour is what I guess I'm asking for, because everybody dropped off, or so many people dropped off.
Yeah, I'll make that clear. I think I didn't make it clear enough that it was going to go longer than an hour. So I'll make it clear. Anybody else want to add?
Yeah, I like the direction, Steve. I appreciate you setting us up, and you know, as a program that's kind of dealing and struggling with the university's understanding of what we are and where we belong and where we exist. There's a lot of the information you talked about is important, not just in preparation for Academy, and not just where we go with regards to the division, but yeah, to our field and to the universities that we teach at as well. So I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to, you know, to this work.
Yeah, thanks.
I thank you to Therese for forwarding this to me and inviting me to this, because I think this is a really timely and important topic. I'm actually of that generation that spent 20 years in corporate, went and got her PhD, and now I'm in academia, but also doing consulting. So I think there's some big shifts that I'm also seeing from a teaching perspective, and also from peer consultants in my age group and my generation, that is really kind of impacting the education landscape as well. So it's just a really interesting and timely topic to be a part of. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Awesome. Any other final comments? Okay, so we have our next steps. We have our next meeting. Herb, when's the next meeting? Should be the first Tuesday of next month at 10 o'clock. Do you think I should keep it to 90? I typically have said 2 hours. Do you think I should say 90 minutes, you all, to make it more palatable, or go to, an hour is too short. 2 hours might be too long. Is 90 minutes right? Is that a sweet spot ask? Yeah.
I'll say yes.
Okay.
And I've got, it's Tuesday, May 2. So Tuesday the 2. Okay.
Yeah. And if you go to the website, which is on there, you can always see the RSVP for that there, and you can see all the recordings and all our documentation from the meetings. Everything is on that website, including everybody who's part of it. And I'll start making a list of programs. I'm gonna actually have a program link where you can see all the programs that are related to this, as well as another list like that. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we're done for now, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye. Bye. Thank
you. Bye,
all.
everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
Herb, you can stop recording.